3:59 here. It says 3:59 here. Are we at 4? Gotta make sure I'm right.
Yeah, we're good. It's 4 o'clock.
Yeah, it's 4.
All right, I'd like to call the regular city council meeting to order, please, for Wednesday, March 27th. And let's do a roll call, please.
Councilmember Martinez Bravo.
Here.
Councilmember Santangelo.
Here.
Councilmember Tennyson.
Here.
Vice Mayor Kildee.
Here.
And Mayor Tremblay is absent for the record, but expected shortly.
Okay, so with that, we have a closed session item. We have 4 items. I'm going to ask Counselor, would you please explain as to reasons why we're going to go into closed session?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. Yes, there are 4 items on closed session. First case deals with OPV Coalition versus Fox Canyon. Second matter is Ventura County Citizens against Mega Gas versus City of Camarillo. Third case is Roy Allen Slurry Seal versus City of Camarillo. And the fourth matter is discussion under initiation of anticipated litigation, and there is 1 matter. If there's any reportable action, I will make that report. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we are going to go into closed session, and we will be back at 5.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Camarillo Library Board of Trustees for March 27th. Let the record reflect that all council members are present. And may Councilmember Tennyson please lead us in the flag salute? Okay, thank you. And moving on to the approval of the agenda, are there any changes to that? Okay, seeing none, the agenda is approved. And we'll move to the general public comments. Is there anyone who wishes to address the library board? Okay, seeing no one, we will move on to our consent calendar. Can we please get a motion and a second to move that?
So moved.
Okay. And City Clerk, can you please call roll call?
Trustee Kilby? Trustee Kilby?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Trustee Santangelo?
Yes.
Trustee Tremblay? President Pro Tem Tennyson?
Yes.
And President Martinez Bravo.
Yes. All right, and that moves anonymously or unanimously. And then moving on to the discussion item, we have the library activity updates. We don't have a staff to report, but we do have the report attached to our agenda, and we will go ahead and receive and file that. Yeah, I don't think my microphone. The light is on, but. Can you hear me? Yeah. You know, it is a little lower than usual, I think. Okay, so we will move on to board and staff comments. Do we have any comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and adjourn this meeting.
I will call to order the meeting of the Camarillo Sanitary District and let the record reflect that all council members are present. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll move on to the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve consent.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Kilby?
Yes.
Director Martinez Bravo?
Yes.
Director Tremblay?
Yes.
Secretary Tennyson?
Yes.
And Chair Santangelo.
Yes. And that passes unanimously. And I just realized that I skipped general public comments. Is there anybody that would like to address the Camarillo Sanitary District? Okay, seeing none. That brings us to board and staff member comments or reports. Any staff member comments? Board member? Okay. Then that brings us to adjourn, and I will adjourn.
Forgive me in advance for my laryngitis. We're going to call this meeting of the successor agency to order. Are there any public comments for the successor agency? Hearing none, we have 2 items on consent. Do I hear a motion on consent?
I'll move the approval of consent.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Secretary, please call the roll.
Councilmember Martinez Bravo?
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo?
Yes.
Councilmember Tennyson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kilby?
Yes.
And Mayor Tremblay.
Yes. Do you have any board or staff comments? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting of the successor agency, reconvene the meeting of the city council. Let's see. First up will be council and staff comments and reports. Any comments from staff at all? Hearing none. Let's go with council then. Who'd like to start us off? Councilmember Santangelo.
I'll start because I'm going to be very short. On March 20th, I attended the LAFCO meeting. March 21st, CPA Executive Committee, and that's all I have to report today.
Councilmember Martinez Bravo.
Thank you, Mayor. On March 15th, I attended the CAL FIRE Structure Academy graduation, and we provided city certificates to all of the 37 graduates, and I attended that event with Councilmember Tennyson. On March 21, I attended the Economic Development Collaborative meeting in person, but unfortunately, we were unable to attain quorum, so we will be meeting next month. On March 21st, I attended Senator Monique Limon's annual Woman of the Year event with Councilmember Santangelo. And I would just personally like to thank, there were multiple women who were awarded, but there is one in particular who is serving and representing our children here in Camarillo. This is Elizabeth Botello, Oxnard Unified High School District Trustee, representing our high school students, and I'm very thankful for her work. March 24th, on Sunday, I attended the 20th Annual Bowls of Hope fundraiser for Many Mansions, and I was very honored to serve at that event with Ventura County Supervisor Vianney Lopez, Fillmore Council Member Cristina Villaseñor, and two reverends who I met there, Tom and George from St. Patrick's Episcopal Church. And yesterday, March 26th, I attended the Woman in Ag event hosted by the Farm Bureau of Ventura County, CoLab, and the Ventura County Cattlemen Association. And I also received an email communication today to invite council to the flag ceremony from the Camarillo Healthcare District. They asked that I invite you all. I think it's going to be on your calendar as well. This recognition is the highest honor within that organization, and that is going to be on May 17th at 2 p.m. And at the end of this meeting, I also wanted to respectfully ask if we can please adjourn today's meeting in honor of Matthew Urango, an artist and disability rights activist who sadly passed away last week at the age of 34. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we will do that. Who's next?
I'll go.
Vice
I
Mayor
don't
Kildee.
have anything to report tonight other than wish everybody a happy Easter.
Councilmember Tennyson.
On March 14th, I attended the VCOG board meeting. March 18th through the 27th, I participated in RDP's annual lobbying trip to Washington, D.C. And on March 25th, attended the Investment and Finance Committee meeting.
And that's it.
That's it.
Okay. All right. Very well. Thank you. For meetings attended on March 27 today, I attended the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency Board of Directors meeting on which I sit as a director, and that's why I was late to the meeting. And I checked in with the city clerk when I arrived so she can note my time of arrival. I think it was 4:18, something like that. Under council comments, I just had one thing I wanted to ask about. I want to make sure that the public is aware that we intend to place an item on our council agenda on April 10 of this year to share an update on the Camarillo Airport. The purpose of the update is to discuss the two county processes that are currently underway for long-term planning at the airport. First of all, the airport layout plan, an update to the ALP, and also the Part 150 noise study. We also want to correct misinformation and dispel rumors about those processes. We want to allow the city council to accept public comment from residents who wish to address the city council on the Camarillo Airport. We recognize that there are residents who are concerned on what's going on. And lastly, but not least, to allow our city council to discuss the subject matter of the Camarillo Airport. So look for that on April 10, and that will be an agenda item. And that is it for me. So with that in mind, we're going to go to consent calendar. I think we've got items E through L respectively. Is there anybody who wants to pull anything? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move the approval of consent.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice Mayor Kildee, a second by Councilmember Tennyson. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Martinez Bravo,
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo,
Yes.
Councilmember Tennyson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kildee,
Yes.
and Mayor Tremblay.
Yes. All right, that record will reflect that that item was approved on a 5-0 vote. We now are moving to item M and a presentation from Commander Tennyson on our uniform crime statistics. Welcome aboard, Commander Tennyson.
Thank you. Make sure you can hear me. Sound coming through okay? Okay.
No.
Good evening, Mayor,
Yeah.
Vice Mayor, Council. Appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you tonight and provide a report on crime in 2023 in the city of Camarillo, and to tell you a little bit about what we're doing at the PD to help keep Camarillo a place where people like to come and live and work and play. We've talked about this before in past years on how we track statistics and crime statistics through in Camarillo and throughout the country. The FBI, since almost 100 years ago, since the 1930s, started tracking crime through the Uniform Crime Reporting Statistics. Crime is tracked to allow researchers to do researches on crime, to allow police administrators to determine staffing levels and to address crime trends. It allows, tourism agencies to provide statistics to people that they want to bring into the city on how safe a city is. So the uniform crime statistics are used by a wide variety of people throughout our city. Our uniform crime report is divided into two different categories. One is violent offenses and one is property offenses. Violent offenses include homicide, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault, just those four categories. And property offenses include residential burglary, commercial burglary, theft, grand and petty, motor vehicle theft, and arson. I'd like to give you just a little bit of a perspective on crime in the city before we start taking a little bit deeper dive into the numbers. There's a lot of factors that affect crime in a city. The economic conditions of the city, legislative changes. A few years ago, we went through the COVID pandemic, and that had a big impact on crime. So there's a number of things that impact crime, and we're going to talk about some of those things as we move through this presentation. Last year, there were several crime trends that we identified in the city. Some of the crime trends were positive, and some of them weren't so positive. One of the things we uncovered were increases in aggravated assaults and in residential burglaries. And then we also saw decreases in commercial burglaries and in motor vehicle theft. So we had a little bit of a mixed bag last year. Catalytic converter thefts, on a positive note, decreased significantly in our city last year. We'd had 2 years in a row of significant increases, and last year we saw a deep drop-off. We believe a large part of that is to new legislation that took effect on January 1st of 2023, where we were allowed to go after the metal recyclers who were accepting the catalytic converters and who were paying the money to the thieves who were stealing the catalytic converters. And we think that had a real big impact on the drive for people to go out and steal catalytic converters in the first place. So that was a really positive trend that we saw. Between 1991 and 2023, which is kind of this just over 30-year time span that we're tracking, we've had a high of 28, almost 29 crimes per 1,000 residents in Camarillo. Back in 1991, that was the highest. And the lowest we had was back in 2020 at 12.45. And we fell this year just a little above the low, and we'll start looking at some of those numbers. But before I dig into those numbers, I just want to show you a little snapshot. We talked at our last council meeting when we were looking at workload of our deputy sheriffs. These are just a few categories of workload. This doesn't capture all the work that our deputies do, but it captures some of the work that they do. We had about 22,000, I hope you can see those numbers, about 22,000 calls for service last year, a slight decrease from the year before. Our crimes, we had exactly one fewer. I got those numbers switched. We had one fewer crime in 2023 than we did last year. So in terms of crimes reported, consistency was the name of the game for crimes reported. We had more arrests this year. We had about 50 more arrests over last year, and we had quite a few more citations that were issued, over 1,000 more citations. We had some people who were injured back in 2022, namely some of our motorcycle enforcement officers who were injured, and so they were back this year, and so we were able to see those citations rise, and we did that in response to some upticks in traffic collisions that we saw last year. So now I'd like to take a little look at the historical perspective of violent crime in our city. So I had mentioned to you that overall, violent and property together was highest back in 1991. This chart here, or this graph here, generally shows the same thing, that crime, we had more violent crimes per 1,000 people in the 90s and early 2000s, and we've seen, aside from a blip in 14, 15, 16, we've seen those numbers lower off. This year we're at 0.82 crimes per 1,000 people, which is a slight uptick from last year, and as we dig into those numbers here in a little bit, I'll tell you exactly where that uptick came in. But overall, we want to show this graph because we want you to see that we are still incredibly safe in Camarillo from a historical perspective. Same thing for crime. We are seeing near record lows for our property crime rate. We're at 12.88 this year. We were at just over 12 back in 19 and 20. So we've come up just a little bit over the last 2 years in property crime rate. And we've got some trends that we've identified that we're going to work on that we'll talk about as well. And then just the combination of both violent and property, which wakes up our overall UCRs. This trend in this graph looks very similar to all the other ones. Very high back in the early 90s, late 90s, and lowering over the last 20 plus years to 13.71. So our overall crime rate per 1,000 people stood at 13.71, which was slightly up. And interestingly enough, one of the first graphs or charts that I showed you showed that we had one fewer crime reported to us this year. We get our population numbers from the Department of Finance, the State Department of Finance, and it said Camarillo last year lost about 500 people, 500 or 600 people. So that's where we get our population numbers from, and that's why our crime rate ticked up just a bit compared to last year, was because they told us the population went down a little bit. So I'd like to break down violent crime a little bit into the categories that I mentioned make up violent crime. We had no homicides last year. We had 7 rapes last year. The number sounds staggering. In 2022, we had the lowest that we'd ever had. Our 5-year average for rapes is 10, so we're below the 5-year average. The demographics on those rapes were that in all 7 cases, we actually had 6 cases, one involved 2 victims. The suspect was known to the victims in every case. In 5 of the cases, the alcohol was involved by both victim and suspect. And so we didn't uncover any trends. And although that increase is significant, from 1 to 7 is a significant increase, our community should feel good knowing that they're not indiscriminate. It's not unknown people targeting folks. It's still not a good number. We don't like seeing that, but it's people who are known to one another before the incident occurred. And in most cases, alcohol was involved by both subjects. Our robberies trended down a little bit, and our aggravated assault is where we really saw a significant increase. We had 14 aggravated assault incidents that were domestic related that had 22 different victims. In one domestic violence situation that was an aggravated assault, we had 6 victims alone in that, and we made arrests in every one of those cases. So our violent crime in terms of aggravated assault was really heavily focused on domestic violence related incidents. We did have 6 gang-related incidents that were aggravated assaults. If you remember, in the beginning of the year, in the spring of the year, we had an uptick in violent crime as it pertains to gangs. Our special enforcement team went out and heavily targeted gangs for the vandalisms that they were doing and some of the violent crimes. We made a number of arrests. I think we made 13 arrests in the aggravated assaults that we had regarding gang members. And so the second half of the year, after we stepped up our enforcement activity and our investigative activity into gangs, the second half of the year, we saw almost no aggravated assaults as it relates to gangs. So our enforcement efforts picked up, and we were able to address that issue and bring those numbers down. I should have went forward to here, sorry about that, but I talked about that, so we'll skip that. Property crime breakdown, again, was one that was pretty consistent all the way across. I did say that we saw an uptick in residential burglaries. That same uptick in residential burglaries saw a decrease in commercial burglaries. The difference is a residential burglary is when somebody breaks into a person's house and takes something. A commercial burglary is just when it's a business and somebody breaks into a business and takes something. We were pretty flat on grand and petty theft. We saw a significant decrease in our motor vehicle theft, and arsons were flat. The one trend we identified for residential burglaries, our 5-year average is 41, so we are right at the 5-year average. In these residential burglaries, 15 of them occurred while victims were out of town, so it was only reported to us later after the victims got back into town. 15 of them occurred between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., so a good chunk of them are daytime burglaries. The real important thing to notice here, 25 of them had a similar MO of crew-type burglaries. So what do we consider a crew-type burglary? These are crews that are going around, they're looking for residents, they'll actually do surveillance, and they'll look for residents to leave their homes. Many of these back up to open space, so they might back up to a barranca or a trail or a golf course or something like that. And these crews work in teams, so they'll have somebody in behind the house in the open space, and then they'll have a team who's sitting in a car watching houses. And if they see somebody leave and they see all the lights turn off and the car leaves, they'll alert their friends who are in the back of the house in the open space, and they'll make entry through the house, usually through smashing a rear slider or even an upstairs window. One of the trends that we did see is that if they find a ladder laying around, they'll make their way to the second story, because generally people, when they alarm their houses, they alarm their doors and windows on the first floor, not on the second floor. And so the thieves in these cases have actually accessed the house through the second story to try and avoid setting off alarms and giving themselves more time inside. Generally, we find that people who commit residential burglaries do not want to have a confrontation with a homeowner. So we don't have residential burglaries where people are home, because it's an enhancement if you get caught, and if you get convicted, it's a sentencing enhancement if somebody's home. So people who commit residential burglaries, they're aware of that, and they do not want a confrontation with a homeowner. So most of ours, nobody was home. We do see a slight uptick during daylight savings from October to March, and we see that because we have more hours of darkness, and they generally wait until things are dark, right after the sun sets. That's when they start doing their surveillance, and they have their people hanging out behind the houses. So those are the trends we noticed in terms of residential burglary. We're 3 months into the year this year, and we're pretty flat for residential burglaries so far this year. And we do work with our partners. Many of these residential burglary crews are transnational crews. They operate out of Los Angeles, and they'll come up to Ventura County and to our cities here in Ventura County and operate. So we work a lot with our partners in Los Angeles County and Orange County, where these crews are based out of and where they operate home base, but they come up here during the day and commit crimes. Traffic last year was a pretty good year for us. We had seen an uptick from 21 to 22. And then 22 to 23, we saw a slight decrease across the board. Fatalities, we had 1 fatality last year. We dropped pretty significantly in injury accidents. One area that we're up slightly, it's just 1, but there's 1 is too many, is DUI collisions. And what we generally like to do when we see upticks in DUI collisions is we like to do more DUI checkpoints throughout the city. We did 4 DUI checkpoints last year throughout the city. Those were funded through a grant through the Office of Transportation Safety. And they generally, what we want, believe it or not, is we want those to result in no arrests. We screen hundreds and hundreds of cars coming through there. We want there to be nobody coming through there who's driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Occasionally, people do that. They don't see what's coming ahead of them, and they drive into our line. But generally, we see 0 or 1 or 2 from our DUI checkpoints, and that was pretty consistent last year as well. This year so far, in the 3 months of this year, we're seeing an increase in DUI collisions, and so we've stepped up our DUI enforcement activity by putting out extra cars, doing saturation patrols at specific times of nights and around specific locations. I did mention that we wrote more citations last year. We had 4,200 hazardous violations last year. So we increased our enforcement activity last year on the hazardous violations. And when we do that, we're not just out looking for anybody driving around to write a ticket. We're focusing on areas where the data tells us we need to focus on. So we're looking at intersections where we see higher collisions. We're looking at areas of the city where we have higher complaints. And through those collisions, we look at what the primary collision factor is. So in every collision, so last year we had 180 collisions. We look every time in those to see what the primary collision factor is, what is causing those. Most often we see distracted driving. People generally won't admit to us when they're on the phone and talking and getting a traffic collision, and if we don't see it, we can't say that's the cause. But you see lane changes where people are changing lanes into somebody and crashing into them. It's probably the result of distracted driving. So we've been doing a lot of enforcement on talking on cell phones to keep people off their cell phones so that their eyes are on the road and paying attention. It makes for a much safer travel for our residents in the city. And so we'll keep doing that. We're constantly looking at the data, getting it out to our patrol deputies and to our traffic deputies to make sure that our roadways are safe for people coming into our city. Another thing that we look at that we're really focused on is response times. These response time numbers are for priority 1 calls. They're emergency calls. There are calls where there's a fight, where there's a domestic violence, where somebody's in danger of getting seriously injured, where we have a traffic collision. Generally, when you see a police officer responding with lights and sirens, those are code 3 responses that are a priority 1 call, and that's what these times measure. I showed the last 6 years because you can see a pretty noticeable increase from 2020 to 2021, another noticeable increase in 2022. We had a slight decrease this year, and we're hoping to address that a little bit further down the road in trying to reduce that number. A good goal for us is about 6.5 minutes. That's typically where we've been over the last decade, and that's where we want to get back down to. So we're a little higher than that, than what we want, and we're looking at some ways that we can address that. One of the things we talked about a few months ago to council was Opticom devices. That's the devices that go in the intersection that cycle a light to green for any emergency vehicle that's running through an intersection with their lights and sirens on. It emits a signal, cycles the light to green, so officers, firefighters, paramedics, they have the right of way when going through, so it speeds up the process and makes things a lot safer. And so that'll be an issue we come back to in the near future. Fatal overdoses. This is another bit of good news that we have. The medical examiner's office just released their report for 2023 that showed fatalities are down for the 2nd straight year in Ventura County. We had 263 fatalities, fatal overdoses last year compared to 278 the year before. And so that's 3 years in a row actually of decreases. Camarillo, we saw a significant drop. We had 20 fatal overdoses in 2022, and we had 12 this year. We still work with our partners to try and address this because one fatal overdose in our city is too many. So we continue to use intelligence-led policing, where we focus on developing information from our residents on who's using drugs, who's selling drugs, where the drugs are coming into the city from, so we can target those folks to try and take drugs out of their hands before they make it into our population. We also work hand in hand with the Sheriff's Narcotics and Intelligence Units to try and address bigger sources of drugs that are coming into the county and coming into our city. We use naloxone. Unfortunately, we use it regularly. We deployed it 32 times last year in Camarillo. Every one of our deputy sheriffs has several naloxone doses that they carry with them at all times, so that if they come across somebody who appears to be overdosing on any sort of narcotic, they can apply the naloxone, and it's amazing at what it does for people who are in an overdose. It's saving lives regularly here in Camarillo and across the county. And then lastly, we collaborate with our partners, both in governmental organizations and in nonprofits. We work with the Saving Lives Coalition, the Salvation Army, United Way, Ventura County Coast, the Fentanyl and Overdose Crimes Unit, DEA, and many others. This is just to name a few. The next slide I'd like to show you is a partnership that you all had a part in. The Saving Lives Coalition is a local coalition that's purpose is to reduce drug and alcohol use by our teenagers and to keep drugs out of their hands. And so I'd like to share a little public service announcement that you all were a part of here recently, just as an example of the collaboration.
Better in the safe than sorry.
Better in the safe than sorry.
This is where you put your prescription medications.
Better in the safe than sorry.
Lock up your prescription medication.
Better in the safe than sorry.
Please lock up your prescription drugs.
Better in the safe than sorry. Better in the safe than sorry. Lock up your prescription medicine.
So this is just a short public service announcement. Pretty simple narrative. The Sheriff's Office was proud to award a grant to the Saving Lives Coalition this year so that they could buy those lock boxes and they're providing 200 lock boxes free to families in Camarillo. So our agency was able to provide them with a grant to purchase those lock boxes. And from what I understand from the coalition, they've got requests in from them, and they're willing to give them out to any family members who have kids in the house, any families who have kids in the house and who have prescription medications. We also team up with them and the DEA twice a year for a prescription drug take-back, because a lot of what we see among our youth is the abuse of prescription medication. So that's a big focus of ours and of the partnerships that we have within the city. And with that, I thought I'd share a photograph of the deputy sheriffs who provide the services to our city throughout the year. We are proud to play a small part in keeping Camarillo safe for people to come and live and work and play. And if people have any more questions or want to take a deeper dive, I could spend hours up here talking about the data and about crime in the city and about uses of force. But I know you all probably don't want to sit up here listening to me for hours. So I've provided a link at the bottom of the screen. These are public transparency dashboards that we created about 3 years ago at the Sheriff's Office. And you can take a dive into all the crime data, the traffic data, our uses of force that have happened throughout the Sheriff's agencies, but specifically here in Camarillo as well, our RIPA data. So if you want to go visit the Sheriff's website, look at our transparency dashboards, and you can really dig into the numbers and take a deeper dive into things. And with that, I would love to entertain any questions you all might have.
Thank you, Commander Tennyson, for a great report. Any questions? Councilmember Martinez-Bravo.
Thank you, Chief Tennyson, for the excellent presentation. I did have 2 questions. One of them is with the data on the increase in arrests. Did you see any pattern, like in variables of age or the type of crime, or was this related to the gang activity?
Well, the gang activity is a really small part of crime in Camarillo. From a violent crime perspective, we had just 50-some violent crimes throughout the whole year. Our highest numbers of crime in the city, and it's not even close, are theft-related crimes. And we've done a really good job. I would say most of our arrests come in that category from the theft-related crimes. Okay. We've done a good job partnering with the outlets in the last couple of years and building really positive relationships with the outlet mall, not just the loss prevention and the security team at the outlets, but the individual loss prevention teams at each of the stores in the outlets. So they all have their own individual loss prevention. And so what we saw is high numbers of people coming from out of the city, out of the county, to the outlets. Probably about a quarter of our property crime comes from the outlets in the 2 big box stores, Home Depot and Target. And overwhelmingly, those numbers are out-of-county people coming in here because, let's face it, it's a great place for people to come and shop, and that makes it a great place for crooks to come and shop as well. So I would say the trends we saw from the higher number of arrests is a lot of that comes from the work we've been doing out at the outlet mall to identify the crooks before they come in and find another reason to arrest them. That's one of the big strategies we're trying to do is work with the security teams out there. They know who the repeat offenders are, who they've been in there before. So they will now call us before they commit a crime and say, hey, look, this crew that's been out here before is here now. If we can, we'll go out there and we'll try to find another reason to arrest them before they're able to commit theft-related crimes here. So
I see.
Believe it or not, a lot of people who are involved in thieving crimes are drug users as well. So if we can take them off the street for being under the influence of a controlled substance before they go in and commit a crime, we're all for doing that to prevent crime from occurring.
Okay. Thank you so much. And then my second question is, I've always been very interested in prevention programs for all sorts of issues, but prevention programs specifically for alcohol or substance use and abuse. Can you speak to that and see if is there what we have and then what we could possibly use in the future?
Yeah, so we do crime prevention at a number of levels, right? For alcohol and drugs, we start in the high schools, and we have school resource officers in all 3 of our high schools. We do a lot of work on educating them on the dangers of drug and alcohol use. All of our SROs do presentations throughout the years at the schools. The elementary school is a little young for that. We do some of it at the middle schools as well, but it's mostly geared to our high school students, where we talk about the dangers of drug and alcohol use. We bring the DUI trailer out. The DUI trailer is a trailer that we have with all other law enforcement agencies, and it actually has a car that was involved in a DUI collision in the back of the trailer, and it's got plexiglass walls so they can see in it, and there's a presentation that goes along with that, just to show kids when you have that car in front of you and you see the mangled mess of a car that's involved in a traffic collision because of drugs or alcohol, it really drives home the point of how dangerous it is. So we start that in high school. We have a crime prevention officer, a full-time crime prevention officer in our community resource unit. He's out in making contact with our businesses and provides monthly reports for our businesses on crime trends that we're seeing in the city. He provides that same information for HOAs and neighborhood watch groups throughout the city, and he's communicating on a monthly basis, providing updates on all those crime trends and providing tips on how to avoid becoming victims of crime. So we do it for our businesses, we do it for our homeowners, we do it for our kids, we do it at all levels.
Thank you so much. I don't have any more questions, but just thank you for the work that you do. Thank you to all staff and for keeping Camarillo safe. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Santangelo.
You already answered it, sort of, but I was going to ask about the percentage of crime or theft crime that's just from the outlets. Could you go over that again?
Yeah, so it's usually about a quarter of our crime comes from our property crime comes from the outlets. So you saw the numbers for thefts in Camarillo. We had 950 total crimes last year, and of those theft-related crimes, let me find my page. We had 397 grand thefts and 389 petty thefts. So the overwhelming majority of our crime in the city is theft-related. And I will tell you right now, a trend we're addressing is that right now this year, shoplifts are up pretty significantly. So we're working hard from a technology standpoint to address that. We also have a new organized retail theft task force that the Sheriff's Office received grant funding for. We received $15.6 million in grant funding. That organized retail theft task force just got off the ground here within the last month or two. And so they'll be doing operations, a lot of operations here in Camarillo, because we know throughout the Sheriff's Office that Camarillo, of all of our contract cities, is probably the hottest spot for organized retail theft type of activities. So we're going to be focusing a lot of the resources from our organized retail theft task force here in Camarillo, which will be good for us.
Perfect. You read my mind. That was going to be my next question. So thank you. Thank you for a great presentation and great work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the report. Eric, can I drill down a little bit on that aggravated assault? And you were mentioning that a number of them last year were domestic. Is that pretty much the trend that you see, that oftentimes that aggravated assault, they know the victim with that?
Yeah, I would say every year in the aggravated assault category, domestic violence cases make up the majority of those. We did see an uptick in those this year. We didn't have that many last year, but that is pretty common that that we see domestic violence cases make up the majority of our aggravated assaults.
But we don't really know from year to year whether or not that's going to be the case. There could be some extenuating circumstances on that adds an uptick in that.
Yeah, it does. So, I mean, this last year we saw the gang violence at an increase. We'd had a lull in gang violence for about 2 or 3 years. And last year we saw an uptick in activity from tagging crews here in Camarillo and new tagging crews coming into Camarillo. And in the early part of the year, that played a little bit of a role in the uptick in gang violence. And once we were able to identify who some of these people were, we were able to target them by enforcement actions, by doing search warrants at their houses behind investigations. We were able to stem that tide pretty significantly and pretty quickly.
And then when you do capture a burglar or a criminal, are they typically residents or a lot of them from out of town, or does it depend on year to year and situational situations that they find yourself in?
It really depends upon the crime category. So the arrests we make in shoplifts, for example, most of our shoplifters are not homegrown shoplifters. Most of our shoplifters, particularly the outlets and the 2 big box stores, are from out of town. If you're talking about domestic violence, those are all folks that live and reside here in Camarillo. So it really depends upon the category, but what I can tell you is the trends in those categories is pretty consistent from year to year.
And from some of our, I don't want to necessarily call them neighboring cities, but they're seeing an uptick in burglaries of particularly jewelry stores. Now that task situation that's been formed, task force that's been formed, are they not only aware of that, but did they look at the whole matrix of retail crime and try to counter as much potentially as they can?
Yeah, so they're going to be looking at any crime that they believe is an organized crew, an organized retail theft crew. They're going to be looking at any of those crime categories. So for example, catalytic converter thefts, those have generally been organized crews that come up from Los Angeles. The Organized Retail Theft Task Force is not just going to be dealing with the retail side of things. They're also going to be dealing with those kind of crews that are coming up from Los Angeles as well. But the primary focus is going to be on retail theft crews, but they will address some of those other concerns as well. And regarding the jewelry store burglars, we haven't seen that trend here in Camarillo, that we've had an uptick in that at all.
Okay. And I just want to end, thank you. And if you could pass on to all your staff members and employees at the police station, we really appreciate all the efforts 24/7, 365 days out of the year to make Camarillo one of the safest cities for their population in the whole state. So if you could pass that along to them, we really appreciate their efforts.
I will, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Tennyson.
Just one quick question. Is it accurate to say that the categories of violent crimes are much less predictable and preventable than all of the categories in the property crimes?
Yeah, when you're dealing with domestic violence issues, those are hard to predict. Although I will tell you, we're able to track repeat calls at homes, and we are proactive in that. When we have calls and houses where we're having repeat calls for domestic violence, we will proactively go out and make contact with people and offer up resources through victim advocate at the DA's office, through the Family Justice Center, and that sort of thing. So we try to be as proactive as we can, but naturally, things that are happening behind closed doors are hard for us to predict and prevent.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor, you had another question?
Yeah, I just had a follow-up, Eric. In 1991, what was that specific year? Why was that targeted? Was that the roughly 20-some-odd year that we've had the crime statistic that we were compiling? Because there's been a significant change since 1991.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't know all the trends that resulted in the decrease. Throughout our country, if you look at the UCRs throughout the country, violent crime has tended, and property crime have tended to decrease nationwide. We've had obviously some years in there where there have been spikes, but what we see here in Camarillo is generally consistent with what we've seen nationwide. And again, I was a little bit younger and not involved in law enforcement back in 1991, so I'm not totally sure what was driving the higher rates back then, and what's in the interim 10, 15 years. I can tell you what's going on now, but the trends have been consistent throughout the country from what we see in Camarillo as well.
Thank you.
One follow-up, Mr. Mayor.
You bet.
Haven't the laws changed significantly over the years in the dollar amount from petty theft versus grand theft to drive down some of the felonies to misdemeanors?
Yes, so from a theft perspective, that's been a real problem for us, in particular the retail theft, where we've had criminals who've come up from Los Angeles who've committed thefts. And as you all know, Proposition 47 was passed several years ago that increased the threshold from $400 to $950 to make it a felony. We've stopped crews from Los Angeles who have come up here, and they have under $950, and they tell us we kept it below $950, so give us our citation, right? Because a misdemeanor crime is generally a citation. But there is another law that's called conspiracy in California that makes it a felony to conspire with one or more other individuals to commit a crime. And we use that, any chance we can use that to put people in jail to make sure they know that you may get away with that elsewhere, but you're not going to get away with that in Ventura County and in Camarillo specifically.
Thanks, Chief Tennyson. Thanks for a great report. I just had one observation, that is when you put on the slide regarding calls for service, I think it was about 22,000. I remember our conversation at the last meeting regarding the sergeant cover car. And for contextual purposes, if you add in the calls for services plus the arrests, citations, reports, self-initiated activity, it's almost 60,000. It's 59,310 for Camarillo.
Yes.
So it's a very large amount.
Yeah, so that was one chart that was left out of here because it's easier to put 4 charts on a slide than 5. But we had about 16,000 incidences of self-initiated activity by our deputies. So that's proactive policing. When you're not on a call for service or responding to a call for service and you see something that's reasonable suspicion that piques your interest, that you might make a stop and investigate further. We had our deputies did that about 16,000 times last year.
Yeah, give us an example of a self-initiated activity. I know you did that last time.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I gave you an explanation before of I happened to be out getting lunch, and I saw somebody who was walking from their car, and then they walked into a liquor store, and then they went back to their car, and then they walked past me to use a restroom in a restaurant that I was waiting for my food. And when they walked past me, I recognized symptoms of somebody being under the influence of a controlled substance. So I made a consensual contact and walked out and talked to the person, and it turns out the person was under the influence, the driver was under the influence, they had cocaine in their car. So that would be an observation arrest, a self-initiated activity where you see something that just doesn't look right and you investigate further.
Yeah, the reason I brought it up is just because of the very, very large workload that Camarillo PD and Ventura County Sheriff's Office has. So like Vice Mayor Kildee and I think all of us up here, we're very grateful for the high quality of law enforcement services we enjoy. So thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions at all? That's it.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot.
Thank you.
All right. We have no public hearings on for tonight and no other presentations. I think why don't we take a recess until 6 o'clock when we have public comments, and we'll be back at that time for public comments. So we are in recess. All right, we're going to go ahead and reconvene the meeting of the Camarillo City Council. Before I ask for public comments, I would just wanted to pay compliments to our staff, our facility staff, and our city clerk's office. I'm really glad of the way that you modified the tables so that I can see the city manager and the city attorney. They may not want to see me, but it's nice to be able to see everybody. So I didn't want to forget that. All right. Calling for general public comments. It's the time that council reserves for items that are not on the agenda. And speakers are limited to 3 minutes. And you'll see the timer up there. I believe I've got one public comment card so far, and it's from Sarah Weiss. It could be Sarah Weiss, and forgive me if I mispronounced it. I got it right the first time. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Weiss. I'm a resident in Camarillo and graduate at Cal State Channel Islands. I'm an expecting mom, currently on disability, and I've been working on this attached ADU project on Berry Street for the past 3 years with my life savings. I'm here tonight to seek relief from the overhead utility undergrounding in lieu fee, a fee that is inequitable, will cause hardship, and I would like to outline the case. It should not even apply to my project. This is inequitable. Based on public information available, the fund has only raised $393,386 total. My attached ADU on Berry Street would account for 6% total of that fund. This is clearly inequitable. This $22,680 that is being taxed upon me is a hardship. This is a 9% increase on my total construction cost of $250,000. And as noted before, I'm currently on disability using my entire life savings. It is my claim that my project doesn't even fall into this category, 16.20.010. Therefore, the overhead utility underground in lieu fee shouldn't even apply. As it states, and you'll find them in your folders, this applies to additions that exceed 50% of the reasonable replacement value of such existing structure. This property is currently valued at approximately $621,000, and the new construction will not increase the replacement value by more than 50%. And that's whether we are looking at cost of construction or total value of property. As outlined, the City Council has the authority to provide relief because it is inequitable and creates hardship. I think I have outlined why both are true, and I'd like to restate my claim that the project doesn't even fall under the code and the fees should not be charged at all. I hope I have your support in addressing my concerns. And also, the reason I'm even building an ADU is a quote from the California Department of Housing and Community Development, is that ADUs are an affordable type of home to construct in California because they do not require major new infrastructure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Weiss. I hope you understand that because we don't have this item on our agenda tonight, we're unable to discuss it, but I would encourage you to speak with our staff regarding your comments.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the audience who wish to address council on any items that are not on the agenda? All right, Councilmember Tennyson.
I just wanted to point out an example of civics in action tonight. We have a young man in the audience. It's a Boy Scout here on a Boy Scout project observing City Council meeting. And I don't know if you want to introduce yourself and tell us what your project is? If that's okay, Mr. Mayor?
That's fine. That's fine. Why don't you please come on up to the microphone and introduce yourself. Tell us what troop you're from and what you're working on.
I am Aiden from Boy Scout Troop 831, and I'm here to try and find some sort of issue that I can ask or interview any of you about for a merit badge for citizenship in the community. And so I'm trying to find some issue that I could potentially ask, potentially what is being done or how young people can get involved.
Excellent. Very good. Well, thank you for being here. best of luck on your citizenship in the community, Barrett Badge. I bet, I can't speak for everybody, but I bet almost any of us would be happy to speak with you about it. And we had a real good presentation tonight from Chief Tennyson on uniform crime statistics, so I'm sure that you could come up with some questions regarding that and what the city council has done, for example, in the recent past to work on that item. Just as a suggestion.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thanks for being with us. All right. Any other comments? All right, hearing none, we'll close public comments. Madam City Attorney, do we have a closed session report?
Yes, Council, on the items on the agenda, there was no reportable action taken. Thank you.
All right, thank you. With that in mind, we're going to go ahead then, and we will adjourn this meeting of the Camarillo City Council. Oh, actually, I apologize, Councilmember Martinez Bravo. Not
Nope.
quite yet. Please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for allowing me to adjourn this meeting in honor of Matthew Urango. And I have created a little bio here that I wanted to read for you. Matthew and his twin brother were born in Oxnard, California on Valentine's Day of 1990. Matthew was diagnosed with spina bifida, kyphosis, and he also used a prosthetic leg since he was 2 years old. He was well known for being a vocal advocate for people with disabilities. As a child, Matthew taught himself to play multiple instruments like the drum, the piano, and later the guitar. And when he was in high school, he played in punk bands. Matthew, known by his professional name Cola Boy, is a self-described, quote, disabled disco innovator, end quote, who sang and produced his own brand of disco music. In 2021, Cola Boy released his album, Prosthetic Boombox, that garnered millions of streams on Spotify. He also performed in major music festivals such as Coachella, where he appeared in a lineup with Ariana Grande, Oxnard's Anderson .Paak, and Bad Bunny. He used his platform to advocate for social issues, including those related to people with disabilities. He was a community organizer who worked on issues related to farm workers, tenant rights, and immigrant communities. He was also an honorary board member of the nonprofit Oxnard Performing Arts Center. He proudly called himself Afro-Latino, and he had mixed ancestry, which was white, African-American, Chumash, and Mexican. In an interview, Matt said, quote, "Not a lot of artists are visibly disabled. Society wants us to stay inside and to be timid and docile and not to feel confident or cool or sexy," end quote. An impromptu vigil was happened in the city of Oxnard, and it really brought droves of people and community members to mourn his passing. Matt was born on Valentine's Day, and he passed away on St. Patrick's Day last week. And I know that the love and the impact that he made will continue on through all those that he touched. As we adjourn today's meeting in his honor, the city of Camarillo sends our sincerest condolences to his mother and father, Lisa and Joseph Urango, and his twin brother, Marcus, his younger brother, Noah, and all who loved him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Martinez Bravo, and I apologize. I'm glad I looked over just before I banged the gavel, and we will adjourn in Mr. Urango's memory. Thank you so much. Anything else? All right, this meeting is adjourned.